Welcome to the Aviation Insurance Podcast, where we talk about all things aviation insurance, safety, and so much more. And recently, someone shared a LinkedIn post with me, and I thought it was very interesting. And it's something I want to just come in and tackle. And I'm not going to share the person who shared it, but just the title of the post really grabbed my attention. Let me just share it with you. It is Aviation doesn't have an insurance market, it has an insurance cartel. Now, the poster of this is probably got a lot of good intention. Their title lists them as an aviation advocate. And certainly, while I'm in the aviation insurance industry, I'm also an advocate for my clients, and a pilot as well. And so I just want to read through some of this post and, you know, agree with potentially a few things, and then kind of provide a little bit of education and dispel some of the thought processes from someone who kind of sits on both sides of the fence in aviation and insurance. So I'm just gonna to read some of this and then comment. So here we go. Let's stop pretending this is about safety. He starts out. Aviation insurance today is opaque, unaccountable, and increasingly detached from real risk. Premiums spike overnight, coverage shrinks without explanation, arbitrary hour requirements, I'm sure he's referring to pilot requirements, out of thin air. Entire operations become uninsurable with no data, no appeal, and no due process. No transparency, no competition, no accountability. So I'll stop right there. That's just the introduction. So, first and foremost, what is insurance? Okay. Insurance is not a government entity. It's not an entitlement. Insurance is a means of transferring risk from one party to another. So insurance is having a party who agrees to take on the risk of another party. Now, for most people, those insurance companies are registered or licensed, approved to do business in each and every state that they do business. In order to do that, their policies have to meet certain languages. They have to have requirements for amount of reserves that they have financially to pay for the claims and the amounts that they write. It's a very sophisticated process that is monitored by the government. But at the end of the day, insurance companies are companies for profit that agree or not to take on someone else's risk. It's not a financial entitlement by a government or anything else. They have to return a profit. Right? And aviation, the principle of insurance are dealing with the laws of large number. So when we talk about insurance deals with the law of large numbers. The premiums of many pay for the claims of a few. And when we're talking about aviation insurance, we're talking about extremely large whole values or insured values for aircraft and extremely large limits of liability. In addition, aviation losses always, seem to be susceptible to larger awards or liability awards from juries and judges because it's an aviation activity. And so nuclear verdicts constantly are, affecting the market. So we don't have a high number of insurable units, so we don't have the law of large numbers. We have few numbers, and we have significant catastrophic expense. So starting from 1911, when aviation insurance was first written, it was about insurers finding a way to spread the risk and get enough premium to pay for claims by spreading that risk, because no one insurer could sustain the risk that aviation brings. And they're all in the business of writing more premium than they pay out in claims, and that doesn't always happen. But what the insurance industry has done for aviation is it's constantly stepped up to provide risk transference solutions for the aviation insurance industry over the years. But there is competition. There are multiple insurance companies that write aviation risks, and they will compete with each other. However, a lot of these companies, two of them in the market right now, are coming up on 100 years writing aviation insurance in the United States. And so they have a long track record of what they've paid claims for, and they have trends. Now, to agree with the poster, it's a challenge because you know, because they can group these losses into different categories, whether that's, single pilot, whether that's multiple pilot, whether that's areas, whether that's type of aircraft, they have data that inform the decisions whether or not for their company it's a good idea to put their money on the line or not. But they're a business and that is their right to make a decision whether or not to accept a risk. It is not a government program or a right that is provided to aircraft operators that they will have insurance, right? They have to make business, and underwriters have to make disciplined decisions in order to provide that product. Now, let's go back to the fact that I talked about the risk has to be spread, right? No one insurer can just say, we're going to write, this $250,000 airplane with $1 million or $5 million of coverage, or let's say an $80 million jet with 300 or 500 million of limits of liability. What they have to do is purchase reinsurance, right? So most aircraft, if they have an insurance company policy, that insurance company is reinsuring or going to another insurer and ceding a portion of that risk. And that reinsurer has to agree to the type of risks that they're willing to reinsure. They have to agree on what that premium will be. And so underwriters have specific costs. So the reinsurers, they don't, and for the most part, they don't underwrite every risk. They underwrite the portfolio. And so everything that these underwriters do are underwritten and reviewed by the reinsurers, because if they don't have reinsurance, they can't provide, aircraft insurance policies, to the end user. So it's spreading risk is a fundamental aspect of being able to write aviation insurance business, and it has to be done profitably. Where can we get better as an industry? Well, I think we're already trying, right? And the industry is not perfect, right? Some of the factors, lead to frustration at times, but at the end of the day, the use of telematics, AI is bringing more informed information into the underwriting decisions, where some of the performance basis of a risk can be taken into account, whereas that data wasn't available before. And so, as we talked about, having, these broad policies, that's gonna improve with operators who are able to use, telematics, data-driven underwriting. That becomes possible for them, but it's going to take time for that to be implemented. So at the end of the day, there is accountability to shareholders. There's accountability to reinsurers who are also putting up money. There's accountability to operating by government standards of having the financial, reserves and other requirements, insurance policy language in place to write business. Otherwise, there's no insurance available. And with no insurance available, it's going to really limit the number of people who are going to be able to afford and operate aircraft at the end of the day. So it is not a government program, right? It is their choice. Some people say, well, the FAA says I can do this. And I've said this on the podcast before, but the FAA is not going to write a $250,000 check in the event of a loss. They're not going to write a $5 million check, $10 million check. They're not going to write a $100 million check. The insurance company does. And so with that kind of money on the line, their underwriters have to make very financially responsible and risk responsible decisions to try to get enough premiums to pay for the claims that will inevitably happen. Even for the best pilots, some claims are out of the control. So it's a tough job, and insurers try to do it responsibly to deliver the best product. They value relationship, they value safety, they value mutual growth over time. And so it's a process, but it's not without transparency. Obviously, insurance companies are companies, and they have privileged information that they can't share with their companies. Like if they tell everyone else what their rates are, that's obviously not good for business. But the market does understand what it takes to make money or not, and a lot of times premiums are lower because of competition, and as a result of that, the insurance companies become less profitable. And in the season of increased capacity, increased competition, underwriting gets more laxed, and ultimately the cost of these claims and the liability awards keeps rising. The expenses of any claims keep rising, and so you can't keep having lower premiums with higher costs without that market turning. And so when it turns, premiums go up, and it's not frequently, it's not overnight. It happens. The last soft market cycle of low rates lasted from 2006 to the first quarter of 2018. And from then on, there was a couple of years of increasing premiums. All right, this was a trend. The market comes up, insurers get what they need to sustain, and then capacity and competition increases. It comes down, underwriting gets, the requirements get loosened. It's not as tight, and then ultimately the losses catch up. People pull out of the market. There's less capacity, less competition. The requirements for pilots increase again. The rates go up. It's a part of the insurance cycle, and it's not ideal. It's not ideal for insurance carriers, but at the end of the day, our consumer continually wants lower rates, even though the expenses of everything is going up. So I think those are just important things to keep in mind. It is a business. We have to have the right mindset, understanding what insurance is, what insurance companies have to go through to write business responsibly and to stay in business. Because if they do the things everyone wants, then they're not going to be in business. No one has insurance, and very few people are going to be able to afford to fly. And obviously, airports and service providers go along with it. All of it who need risk transfer financial protection. All right, back to the Post. Small operators, flight schools, and owner pilots are getting crushed, while the same underwriters recycle the same blanket exclusions and call it risk management. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Experience is reduced to blunt metrics instead of demonstrated competence. Accredited training is ignored. Safety culture is irrelevant if you don't fit the spreadsheet. Appeals are meaningless because the decision makers are insulated from consequences. They say this isn't a free market. It's centralized risk control with zero oversight. And when insurance dictates who fly, what can be flown, and whether a business survives, insurance becomes a regulator without a badge or accountability. This should concern everyone. Well, really, everything I just talked about addresses that, right? Experience does matter, but there are a lot of other factors in underwriting. And what one company is willing to do and charge is going to be different than another company. And it's the insurance company's right. They're a business. They can agree to write the type of business they feel they can do profitably, and they can agree to not do, the type of business that they've either, that's demonstrated through experience, or they've, been informed mathematically is a problem. This happens in every line of insurance. Safety culture is absolutely critical. Accredited training is absolutely desirable, but there's also a lot of accredited training where pilots still have losses. So there's many factors that come into play when underwriting a risk, right? And so insurance, again, I come back to it. It's not a privilege or a right that we are guaranteed. It is a company who can agree to or not agree to take on that risk. Aviation safety improves through training, professionalism, and standards. I agree. Not through backroom actuarial decisions made by people who never step onto a ramp. Now, I'm going to strongly disagree on that because most aviation insurers, so many of them are led by and filled with pilots. Many people in this industry don't get into insurance, to aviation insurance for insurance. They get into it because of aviation. And if you listen to this podcast at all, you will hear, the leaders of many of our aviation insurance companies, and most of them have an aviation background. They talked about getting into aviation, pilot shortages, and finding this career as a result of being a pilot. And many of them use aviation and love aviation and passionate about aviation and are pretty aware of how aircraft operate, safety cultures. They go in and meet with manufacturers and customers and are very aware of how the aviation industry operates. I know this personally because I do this myself, and I bring underwriters to do the same. And so it may have that appearance, and that's unfortunate. As an industry, we want to continually educate the aviation industry, our clients, our partners, that we are out there. We're in the field. We do love aviation. We're passionate about it. We're pilots, and we definitely want aviation to succeed, and that's what we work hard to do. But aviation insurance underwriters, they have to write business that is profitable in order to stay in business. And in order for aviation to succeed and thrive, we need aviation insurers willing to write aviation business. It's not as easy as it might sound. So the system needs sunlight, it needs competition, it needs people willing to say this out loud. I'm done watching good operators get wiped out quietly. Well, again, everyone has a perspective depending on the seat they're sitting in. And, I've highlighted the key factors that go into providing aviation insurance. It's a business that's dealing with very significant dollars, very serious considerations. And if underwriting's not done responsibly, we don't have an industry. If we don't have an aviation insurance industry, we don't have airplanes flying. It's bad for everyone. So they have to make responsible decisions. They have to accept risks that, based on their experience and the information they have, they can do profitably. As I said, the great news is that with the emerging technologies, the information and data available, their ability to write based more on demonstrated performance of individual operators becomes more practical. It is being implemented slowly at different insurers over time, but that is an exciting part of what comes. And insurance can be frustrating. Obviously, most people can buy a car and let anyone drive it. Well, with aircraft, the values are higher, the their capabilities are dramatically different. The pilot experience, is dramatically different. It's not the same based on age. There's not as much mathematical data as there is in automobile insurance, for instance. But there is a track record over time of who's involved in losses, what are the circumstances, and so underwriters just have to do their best to make the best financial and risk responsible decisions in order to keep writing aviation insurance business. And so, aviation insurance is not a cartel. It is a group of people, brokers, carriers, claims everyone involved who's passionate about aviation, who wants to see aviation continue to grow and succeed, and who is an absolute foundation and cornerstone of the aviation industry operating, growing, and thriving. And so, while there are some frustrating aspects of the business and it has areas to improve, it's absolutely foundational, critical, and it's constantly working to get better, to provide better, products and services to the clients. But they're also dealing with a lot of obstacles, including increasing costs, increasing liability awards, nuclear verdicts, and pressure to provide a financial return. So, aviation insurance is good. Is it frustrating at times? Sure, I understand it, but we really have to understand what the factors are that make it run and that make it work, because it is important. And so, again, I'm not naming this person. I don't know them, and they're well intentioned. They want people to be able to operate and fly, and so does the industry. So I get it, but it's easier to come from a more informed perspective when we have the education, and that's really what I'm about. I'm about providing aviation insurance education, helping people understand, all the different facets of aviation insurance, what it takes to run. And understanding these key concepts helps people understand how it works. It helps them make better informed buying decisions and to form those great relationships with their insurance providers. That's all for this episode. Join us again next time as we continue navigating the waypoints in aviation insurance. Until then, enjoy clear skies and unlimited visibility.